If I can request everyone to take their seats, please. We will commence now. Everyone at the back. All right. Okay. All right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem, nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Excellencies, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to you all. Thank you for being here with us on day 3 of the 2024 ISDB annual meetings and the Golden Jubilee celebration. We hope you have enjoyed the series of events that we have lined up with senior experts until today. Today's topic is Accelerating Climate Finance through Green and Sustainability Sukuk, where we will try to shine a light on the suitability and complementarity of Green Sukuk, Social Sukuk, and Sustainability Sukuk with our partners, the International Capital Market Association, as well as the London Stock Exchange. We will then have the honor of benefiting from a special address from Excellency Governor Perry Virgio from the Bank Indonesia. Thank you, Excellency, for joining us. This will be followed by the high-level experts panel, where we have brought together experts from both climate as well as finance to share with us thoughts on this, on how it can be accelerated. The experts will then field questions from the audience before concluding the event. Let me kickstart the proceedings by welcoming His Excellency Dr. Zamir Iqbal, the Vice President Finance and CFO of the Islamic Development Bank, to give brief welcoming remarks.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Sorry for a little bit of delays. First of all, on behalf of His Excellency the President, who was supposed to be here for giving the opening remarks, and unfortunately because he's busy with the governors, he could not come, but we're still expecting that he will spare a few minutes to come and do the special launch for us. But anyway, I won't keep you too long away from the special address from our respected guest, Governor Perry. I think today in this particular session, there are two topics which are very dear to His Excellency the President. One is on climate and the impact of climate on our member countries. And the second one is, of course, Sukuk, because he believes that Sukuk has an enormous potential and which is currently being underutilized. And that's why he's very keen of expanding much more the Sukuk market globally. He was very kind to record a special message for us. So with that, I welcome, on behalf of the President, I welcome you all, and I think we can start his remarks, and then after followed by Governor Perry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Zamir. Now we will play the opening address by His Excellency the President, Dr. Muhammad Al-Jasir of the Islamic Development Bank.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This decade was heralded as the decade of action for the Sustainable Development Goals. Here we are, midway through the decade, and the world continues to grapple with a substandard funding deficit for the SDGs. To help bridge this gap, innovative financial instruments need to be pursued and mobilized. From the perspective of the Islamic Development Bank, we believe there is a pressing need to accelerate the issuance of Sukuk, particularly green and sustainability Sukuk, to mobilize increased financing for the SDGs, including climate finance. With their measurable impact on the ground aligned with the SDGs, Sustainability Sukuk empower investors across various sectors to enrich their threefold bottom line simultaneously. First, earning financial returns. Second, safeguarding the environment. And third, fostering social development. At the Islamic Development Bank, underpinning our strategy is the pursuit of green economic growth, entailing the transition to low-carbon economies by prioritizing investment in renewable energy sources. This strategic approach is designed to assist our member countries in advancing towards their net zero targets. We have ambitiously set a climate finance target of 35% by 2025. The good news is that we have already surpassed this goal 2 years ahead of schedule. In 2023, 40% of our total approvals were geared to climate finance, with a significant portion directed towards investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. With our growth trajectory in the upcoming years, especially in climate finance, we remain steadfast in our commitment to practice what we preach. This entails a continued focus on issuing green and sustainability Sukuk, aligning our financial practices with our environmental principles. As we commemorate our Golden Jubilee, we reflect with deep appreciation on our remarkable journey, having mobilized over $46 billion through AAA-rated Sukuk issuances for sustainable development initiatives worldwide. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for the wider market and stakeholders, I reiterate that green and sustainable Sukuk are fully aligned with the globally accepted ICMA principles. This has been reaffirmed by the guidance on sustainable Sukuk that we are launching here together with ICMA and the London Stock Exchange. We joined hands at the recent COP28 to develop this guidance. The aim is to demystify the Sukuk instrument, define green, social, and sustainability Sukuk, and demonstrate their alignment with the ICMA principles. We hope this initiative will help to expand Sukuk in new markets, attract more investors, and direct more capital towards the SDGs. On this occasion, allow me to express my gratitude to the leadership of ICMA and the London Stock Exchange, Brian Pascoe, Julia Haggett, and their dedicated teams for their unwavering support and commitment to our shared objective. I am delighted that we have reached this milestone together. I highly encourage the market stakeholders to embrace the guidance and take concrete steps to tap into the potential of green and sustainability Sukuk for driving sustainable finance where it is most needed. Let me conclude by thanking my dear friend, Excellency Dr. Perry Warjio, the Governor of Bank Indonesia, for gracing this occasion and sharing his insightful thoughts on this very important topic. Terima kasih, Dr. Perry. Thank you. I would also like to thank the high-level panelists for their participation today. I hope stakeholders in our member countries will take the maximum benefit of your global experience and thoughts, inshallah. I thank you all for your kind attention and wish you constructive deliberations. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
So the message is loud and clear. His Excellency the President made it very clear for us. We cannot rest on our laurels. We have to continue raising awareness of Sukuk and promote its viability as a sustainable finance instrument. This is the perfect segue for the launch of the guidance for green, social, and sustainability Sukuk. We are very privileged to have His Excellency the President arriving, taking the time out of his schedule. If the team is here in shortly, just bear with us. This is where ISDB worked, as His Excellency the President mentioned, together with ICMA and the London Stock Exchange to draft this guidance, which, as he mentioned, demystifies the Sukuk instrument further for a wider audience, defines the sustainable Sukuk, and demonstrates their alignment. In the meantime, as His Excellency makes his way to the stage, extremely honored to have his presence here despite his very hectic schedule. Excellency. As His Excellency the President has to make his way back, let's begin with brief remarks by Mr. Brian Pascoe, the Chief Executive of the ICMA, International Capital Market Association. ICMA convenes all stakeholders from the global capital market to agree on best market practices and standards for sustainable bonds, which include green bonds, social bonds, and sustainability bonds. Mr. Brian Pascoe.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Zamir, for your opening remarks, and also to His Excellency, the President, for his very insightful contribution and thoughts on the research of the guidance and the broader picture in sustainable finance and the goals that we must look to achieve as we head into the future. We are honored as ICMA to be able to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Islamic Development Bank with you and to launch this important guidance at this event. In recent years, sustainable bonds, mainly green bonds, have emerged as one of the most important instruments to finance the goals of the Paris Agreement. Scaling up green and sustainable Sukuk will further help the private and public sector to raise finance to plug the massive climate funding gap and support green local capital market development, as well as target other environmental and social issues. With issuance of $4 billion in Q1 2024, sustainable Sukuk is still only a fraction of the total sustainable bond issuance globally, which stands over $230 billion in Q1 2024 also. However, it is important to note that the $4 billion represents an increase of close to 20% over the same period in 2023. This year, we also mark the 10th anniversary of the ICMA Green Bond Principles, and today's launch is another critical step in establishing and maintaining internationally consistent standards in the key growth segments of sustainable finance and Islamic finance. We are very pleased to have been able to collaborate with the Islamic Development Bank and the London Stock Exchange Group on this important guidance, and my thanks specifically go to Mohsin Sharaf and Shrey Kohli, who together with my colleague Simone Uttermark have drafted this practical guidance. Finally, I want to thank His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Al-Jasser for his vision, Dr. Samir Iqbal for his commitment, and Mohammed Sharaf for his support. We look forward to further engaging with market participants and other stakeholders on sustainable Sukuk and hope the new practical guide published today can be another catalyst to finance our journey to net zero. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Brian, for the partnership and support for the Sukuk market. Let me now invite Ms. Julia Huguet, the CEO of the London Stock Exchange, which is a global financial markets infrastructure, data provider, and a listing hub for bonds of all shades, including Sukuk. Ms. Julia.
Good morning, and salam alaikum. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honour to be invited to the Islamic Development Bank's Golden Jubilee meetings for the launch of the guidance of the Sustainable Sukuk today. Thank you to the Islamic Development Bank and the ICMA for their collaboration to this initiative. It's a pleasure to be back in Saudi Arabia, a country that I've gotten to know well as CEO of the London Stock Exchange, given our commitment to supporting the kingdom's thriving economy and Vision 2030. In many ways, today feels like the culmination of a journey that we've been on for many years. At COP26 in Glasgow in 2021, in the presence of Dr. Zamir Iqbal, CFO of the ISDB, and Ibu Sri Mulyani, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, His Majesty's Treasury of the United Kingdom Government, and the Global Ethical Finance Initiative, we launched the high-level working group on green Sukuk, with the aim to significantly scale the burgeoning market for sustainable Sukuk. During these 2.5 years, the sustainable Sukuk market has seen remarkable growth, with issuance reaching $13.4 billion in 2023 from $4.8 billion in 2020, nearly trebling in size. Since 2017, over $42 billion of sustainable Sukuk has been raised, with over 2/3 of the issuance raised in international markets. But sustainable Sukuk is still a small part of the overall Sukuk market, which saw $220 billion issued in 2023, and an even smaller part of the sustainable bond market. This tells us that the guidance we're publishing today is more important than ever. It follows an announcement at COP28 in Dubai last December, which I had the pleasure of attending, as His Excellency the President has highlighted, and it has been developed in consultation with key stakeholders across the sustainable bond and Sukuk markets to ensure the widest applicability of the ICMA principles. This practical guide aims to provide issuers and market participants with much-needed guidance on how to label Sukuk as green, social, or sustainable, as aligned with the ICMA principles, and increase global investor awareness of Sukuk as an asset class. As a stock exchange that is fully committed to supporting the world's economy to transition to a more sustainable future, we recognize that the effort must be global and leveraging all financial products at the disposal of our economies. Green and sustainable Sukuk play a pivotal role in this effort. As one journey ends, another begins. And the next stage for us and our partners is to engage with stakeholders like standard setters, Sharia regulators, rating agencies and market participants to ensure that the guidance we publish today is embedded across various markets. We're deeply grateful to everyone who's been involved in this initiative, from the Islamic Development Bank and the ICMA to our esteemed partners and contributors for their dedicated efforts in advancing sustainability in the global Sukuk market. Together, we're paving the way for a more inclusive, sustainable and prosperous future. And I look forward to continuing our collaboration in this space. Thank you very much.
Excuse us for this interruption. May I now call upon His Excellency the President to kindly grace us on the podium and share his brief remarks for the launch.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. I hope those who are trying to disrupt the Sukuk market will fail miserably, inshallah. The Sukuk are too good, too powerful, too needed to be left to reckless machinations. That's double entendre. Well, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Your Excellencies, Governors, Alternate Governors, Executive Directors, distinguished CEOs, and expert panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning to all of you. Let me start by once again thanking Brian and Julia on their commitment and efforts to promote the Sukuk market, which is very important for us at the Islamic Development Bank. The guidance on Sustainability Sukuk is an industry milestone. I am confident that it will be key to enhancing awareness of the Sukuk instrument and scaling up of sustainable finance instruments such as green, social, and sustainable Sukuk. Dr. Zamir and his team have put together a high-level panel on this topic, and I am sure you will all see the significance of this growing segment, especially for our member countries. I am very pleased to see His Excellency Governor Perry, and I trust you will all benefit from the rich experience of Indonesia. Excellency, please accept my sincere thanks for taking the time for our audience here on this very optimistic, this very important topic. To the team members who worked on the guidance, on this guidance, thank you for getting into the nitty-gritty of this and setting a standard for the industry that can guide the markets going forward. I thank you for your kind attention and wish you very productive deliberations. And this is really a very important topic for us at the Islamic Development Bank, and we are really, really honored to have such a partnership. And we should accept nothing less than a flourishing Sukuk market that is demanded by everyone, not but by the Muslims or by the member countries of the Islamic Development Bank. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May I now request the three of you to kindly step towards the front of the stage for the launch with the visuals. You can also access the press release and the document. If I can now ask the team members just who worked on this for a group photo with His Excellency the President, Shrey and Simone from the ICMA and LSEC to join us on stage, please. Excellency, Dr. Zamir as well. If I can quickly ask the high-level panelists to join us on the stage for a group photo with His Excellency the President, please. And Governor Perry in the center, please. Thank you, everyone. His Excellency has to move to the Governor's Roundtable now. We are really appreciative of his time here. Jazakallahu khairan. Ahsan al-jaza. We now move to witness a special address. Please take your seats. By the highly respected veteran of the industry, His Excellency Dr. Perry Virgio, who is the Governor of Bank Indonesia. Prior to his appointment as Governor, Dr. Perry also served as the Deputy Governor, Assistant Governor for Monetary, Macroprudential and International Policy in Bank Indonesia. Considered as a champion for Sukuk, we always look forward to benefit from his rich experience. It is my privilege to invite to the podium Excellency Dr. Perry. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah wa syukurillah wa la quwata illa billah. Allahumma sallim wa sallim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ma'ala amma ba'd. Dr. Samir and also President Al-Jazair, thank you very much for inviting me, also ISMA, again on this very important event to share Indonesia experience. If you have still any doubt that Sukuk cannot be green, that Sukuk cannot be sustainable, that Sukuk cannot be inclusive, think again. Within the 10 minutes, I will show you Indonesia experiment on how Sukuk can be sustainable economic development. Beyond that, not only green Sukuk, but green Sukuk can be used for financial market development and can be monetary operation. 10 minutes. There is 3 aspects that I will share. Next slide. The development of green Sukuk for Indonesia, how the role of central bank in this development, also the lesson that you can take away from Indonesia. Next slide. We are among the first and the largest Sukuk issuance, green Sukuk issuance. We started in March 2018 with issuance of 125 billion US global green Sukuk. And after that, we issue regularly, not only global green Sukuk, but also domestic currency green Sukuk. In total, we already cumulative green Sukuk issuance value 6.7 billion US. Maybe small, Julia, maybe so, Brian, but hey, this is Indonesia. Among the first and the largest issuance of green Sukuk, consisting of global green Sukuk 5 billion, retail green Sukuk domestically 1.5 billion, according to 21.8 trillion rupiah, also domestic green Sukuk. How we can do that? Next slide. The first and the most important thing is clear strategy and political commitment from the top. This is the most important thing. Other than that, forget it. The political commitment and clear strategy of national is very important. This is what we started in 2018. There are 4 pillars in this national framework of green economic policy. First, the most difficult thing, use of proceeds, whether new, existing, eligible SDG expenditure with green and or social focus. Among others, renewable energy, raison climate change, sustainable agriculture, also use of clean technology for power and others. How we have to select this? The second pillar start with public project. It's very difficult to issue green sukuk with private. Start with public project, because public project already in the budget, already governance, already the selection. Then added the green aspect and social aspect of those public project in the budget. Macroeconomic policy already there, governance already there. Then adding those of the green and sustainable aspect. This is the second pillar. This is also important for the third pillar. The process of this green sukuk will in the budget, will be used for proper use and will also be recycled for the future project. And the fourth pillar is reporting. We have to make accountability and transparency. So investors trust us. It's very important by issuing annual allocation reporting and impact report. This is the political commitment from the top and clear national strategy. This is the most important that we started in 2018. Second aspect, next slide, which is, as I said, how's the impact analysis? How's this project impact our sustainable economic development? This is a sum of the project contribution of green sukuk for national development. Sumatera Selatan light rail travel, construction of port, as well as also social, tourism, and on the Makassar Hajj dormitory. All of those, we need to assess the impact, real impact. Though, so people can feel the benefit. And investors know this is impactful for the social economic development, sustainable economic development. So this is this lesson number 2. Impact is very important. So we know, we believe, and also we support those green sukuk. Next, this is where the central bank, next slide, how we have to use this green sukuk, global sukuk, or domestic longer-term use for liquidity provision. Short term. So this is that I come to support this green sukuk for our financial market development. So we have, our central bank, we have reserve management. Some of them we allocate on the green and global sukuk, and we use that as underlying for short term liquidity provision. We issue 3, 6, and 12 months of foreign exchange and also domestic currency. So the bank, the investor can, provide liquidity on that. The short-term financial money market development is very important. So green sukuk can be, can be liquid. This is what we are developing. We issue foreign exchange sukuk of Bank Indonesia. We use those, reserve management, reserve for reserve, and then we entrust the liquidity on the 6 and 9 and 10, and now it's becoming trading among the bank, becoming liquidity provision, and also there is like short-term interest rate and longer-term interest connected. This is much more richer development in Indonesia. Next slide. And also the role of central bank and monetary operation. We already use on the Islamic domestic financial, we use not only foreign exchange liquidity, sukuk of Bank Indonesia, SUVBI, foreign exchange sukuk of Bank Indonesia. We also have rupiah sukuk Bank Indonesia. This actually the liquidity procurement and the short-term 6, 9, 12 becoming important, and then not only the project impactful, budget, macroeconomic, but also monetary policy, financial market development, and then becoming richer. Well, in closing, next slide. This is, once again, don't have any doubt from this conference that sukuk cannot be green. Sukuk cannot be financial market development. Sukuk cannot be monetary operation. This is what President Al-Jazeera, invite me to convince all of you. Islamic Development Bank, ISMA, London Stock, and every one of you investor in this conference or elsewhere, please, Sukuk can be green. Sukuk can be financial market development. Sukuk can be monetary operation. What is the three lessons that from Indonesia? One, the most important thing, clear strategy and framework of green Sukuk. Political commitment, national strategy, and regulation of each country. Very important. We can share all this. Number two, clear strategy and needs extra effort. Selection of projects. Start with the public project. It's very easy. And then if public project already done, then follow with private project. Private will be follow if the public can be succeed. And of course, select cooperation. That's why I always might thank collaboration with ISDB. Give me more global sukuk. Give me more green sukuk. Why would we issue together green sukuk? I will use that. Second, number two, gaining commitment and building a strong underlying project. As I said, start with public project. Put in the green, and then also having the right knowledge and reputable partner are crucial. This standard is very important. With that issue today, a strong commitment, coordination from all stakeholders, and also socialization, public awareness, literacy is very, very important. And three, the central bank, my fellow governor of central bank, have also come forward for green sukuk to be market development and monetary operation. Maximize the use of green sukuk monetary operation, integrating green sukuk for money market development, and offers policy incentive to do that. In closing, please, why don't we work together? Stop any doubt that sukuk cannot be green. If we work together, inshallah, Allah will always with us. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Excellency Dr. Perry, as always, for leading the way and sharing with us the success story of the Republic of Indonesia, an excellent blueprint for our member countries to follow and mobilize resources from the capital markets to achieve the SDGs. The stage is now set for the high-level panel for us to hear directly from the experts. For the responsibility of moderating the discussion, it is my pleasure to call upon Ms. Faheen Ali-Bhoy, who is the Managing Director and Global Head of Multilateral Banks and Development Institutions at JP Morgan. Faheen. Faheen heads the global coverage of multilateral banks and development institutions. Prior to this, she headed the JP Morgan Development Finance Institution, which aims to mobilize investments to support economic development in emerging markets. Faheen holds an MBA from the Harvard Business School. I will now call upon the experts to join us on stage. First, we have with us Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin, who is the United Nations Special Envoy on financing the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, a seasoned economist with more than 30 years of experience in international finance and development. Welcome, Dr. Mahmoud. Next, we have with us Mr. Michael Allam, CB, who is the Chairman of Public Sector Banking, Global Banking and Markets at HSBC. Michael is responsible for the coverage of several of HSBC's senior public sector clients and also supports HSBC's Group CEO and the CEO of Global Banking and Markets. Michael has degrees in economics from Cambridge University and the London School of Economics. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for being here. Now I would like to invite Mr. Kenneth Lay to join us on the stage, please. Ken is Senior Managing Director at the Rock Creek Group. Before joining the group, he served as the treasurer for the World Bank, where he and his team managed more than $100 billion in investments for the World Bank, other international financial institutions, and more than 40 of the World Bank's member countries. Ken also led the World Bank Treasury's banking and capital markets programs as they delivered financing and risk management, including for the World Bank. Welcome, Ken. And last but not the least, we have a good friend of the Sukuk market, Mr. Michael Bennett from the World Bank Treasury. Michael is the head of derivatives, structured finance, and capital markets, where he leads the team that is responsible for structured note issuance, all derivatives related to funding, structured finance in transactions for the bank and its clients. This includes catastrophe bonds and swaps, carbon emission rights linked bonds, Sukuk for the IFIM, and project-linked bonds. Michael has spent 16 years with the World Bank, including 5 years in the bank's Paris office. Welcome, Michael. Once again, let me thank you on behalf of ISDB for taking the time and joining us here today. We will have roughly 45 minutes of discussion, followed by questions from the audience, inshallah. And now, to the very able hands of Faheen to take this forward.
Good morning. Good morning, welcome, and assalamu alaikum. I'm really delighted to moderate today's panel on accelerating climate finance through green and sustainable sukuks, and delighted to be joined by these 4 esteemed panelists. So maybe we can get right to it, and if I could turn to you, Dr. Mahmoud. We wanted to start with a pulse check on climate finance overall. Where do we stand? How big is the gap in climate finance that we hear about? And what are the large trends you're witnessing from your seat, especially as you have discussions with member countries of the ISDB?
Right, thank you so much. I'm very grateful to join this esteemed panel to discuss this important topic, and I'm happy to have His Excellency the Governor still with us. I admire your passion and enthusiasm in your presentation, and they are very much right. And Sukuk could be green, but you put very specific prerequisites for that to be fulfilled. And any of what you mentioned in the structure architecture will be missing a lot, and we may be in danger to not to have it as green as we hoped, or even not to be called as sukuk. So it will be just an ordinary kind of debt. And I'll come back to this because the description of the landscape, to answer your question, that I can consider it still insufficient, inefficient, and unfair. This is the climate finance as we know it. Insufficient because we know from many studies, including recently by Nick Stern and Vera Songwe, the same study was extended to work by G20 on development finance gaps at large. And we know that on SDGs at large, we need at least $5 trillion per annum. This is excluding China. If we are focusing on climate-related finance, it's around $2.4 trillion per year. And the assumption by these studies, and they are available, that 1.4 trillion will be mobilized from domestic resources, and 1 trillion will be mobilized externally. The breakdown of the 1 trillion is as follows. We have roughly $0.5 trillion from the private sector. This means that we need to quadruple whatever we have today of finance from the private sector externally. From the MDBs, the figure is around $350 billion a year. This means that we are almost tripling the finance coming from the multilateral development banks, including the Islamic Development Bank and the banks represented here, including World Bank, of course, my former employer. Bilateral finance is expected to be doubled. So between doubling, tripling, and quadrupling, there is a great deal of assumption on how the external finance will be mobilized. But currently, perhaps to confirm what His Excellency Dr. Al-Jasser mentioned about the SDGs, and we are not really meeting the targets, is very much because of gaps on finance. And one of the widely circulated pieces of information was that blog by Larry Summers and Professor Singh, that the net capital flows to developing economies and emerging markets started to be net negative. So anything that could really be coming from mobilizing finance, including through Sukuk, if they are green Sukuk, that would be great. If we want to be more specific, because climate finance goes into different directions. And I saw from His Excellency presentation, as expected, that the majority of funding is going into mitigation areas. Nothing against that. But it's dominating the scene there, that we have seen more in decarbonization, on energy, in renewables. But if you still recall his chart, there were a couple of opportunities in resilient cities and something to do with water management. This brings me to the adaptation agenda that had been, that's why I'm saying it's not just insufficient when we talk about finance, it's unfair as well, because it's not balanced between mitigation and adaptation. Based on the Paris Agreement, 50% of finance should go to mitigation and 50% should go to adaptation by the multilateral financial institutions. The adaptation gap is around $400 billion a year, with reference to a recent report by the United Nations Environment Programme. But again, in the very same program, you can see a great deal of variation between a critical minimum, which is around 180, to the 400. However, let me go very quickly to something that I studied more, which is basically in the case of Africa. The current flows into adaptation around $11 billion during the last few years. Then, based on the indices, the nationally determined contributions, for African countries is 55. So the gap is between 11 and 55. Independent assessments, including by UNEP, is telling us that the gap for Africa is 110. So here there's a great deal of discrepancy, and one would always ask why the indices are repressing the figures, because they know that they are determined by governments, so they know at the end of the day, adaptation finance will be coming from public sources. More than 95%, actually the latest update from the Global Adaptation Center is telling us that roughly 98% of finance for adaptation is coming from public sources, either from external sources or domestic sources. So here, if green Sukuk can really be a game changer, if I can see on the chart next time when His Excellency the Governor update us that the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda spelling out opportunities in water management, food system, agriculture, resilient cities, dealing with deforestation and dealing with desertification. As you can see, many of these aspects have more of public benefits than what could be realized through commercial gains. If we can bundle some of these projects to have a proper mix between the private commercial opportunities with the public impact, that is going to be a great deal of work. And I have seen some good examples, including from a couple of African countries trying to bring energy to water, to food systems and agriculture. How that is going to be funded in Sukuk, that could be in the discussion.
No, that's super. Thank you so much for that kind of broad perspective, not only of the different types of climate that need to be addressed, but the numbers that it takes to get there. So maybe then coming into how the green Sukuk market and the capital markets overall will play that role, maybe Ken, I could turn to you. And as you're aware, many of the ISDB member countries are low-income countries. And they have very nascent financial and capital markets at this point. So from your experience, what are the key building blocks needed for these countries to build and access the capital markets and then sustainable capital markets?
Yeah, thanks very much, Faheen, and it's a great privilege to be here. And it's been fascinating, actually, over the past couple of days to have an opportunity really to get a much broader perspective on the Sukuk market and on Islamic finance generally. So I very much appreciate that, and I appreciate ISDB's long history now and of having put as much into this as they have. I want to get at this question by actually looking starting with looking at the global savings pool and what it is going to take to improve the access that ISDB member countries and the emerging markets more broadly have to this pool of capital. And a lot of these issues are ones that I know we have all been thinking about for many years. I think in the emerging markets, for example, we still have a situation in which there's limited domestic savings, underdeveloped local capital markets. The good news is, I think that this is changing, and I think we're seeing in some of the major emerging markets, we've seen very, very promising developments in this respect. But in many of the other countries, this is still an issue. And I think that's very important because we need to see that develop for a long-term solution to all of these problems. Having said that, if I now look at the international markets, and of course, so many of us come out of a multilateral development bank background, but I think it's important, if you look at the $100 trillion global savings pool, the proportion of that is invested in emerging markets and the proportion of that is invested in high-grade liquid fixed income, which of course is the least costly portion of those allocations, is 25% maybe in total out of that capital. Now that's still, if you compare that number with what we just heard about the needs, you would say, look, that money is out there. And so the question then becomes, what is it that, and I think most of us who have had an opportunity to work in this area know the answer to why this has not been happening. There continues to be a tremendous investor perception of excessive political risks, worries about the reliability of legal and regulatory frameworks, the perceived foreign exchange risks of all of these investments. And the results have been continuing low credit ratings and excessive risk premia for both public and private finance in these countries. I am restating the obvious, but I think it's very important to keep this in mind and keep the work going to try to fix some of these problems. And I know ISDB with the other multilateral banks have been working with countries to try to tackle a lot of these problems, but they are still there. And now, we've also had a discussion, there's an ongoing discussion that what people are calling blended finance can help to crowd in the private sector increasingly. And I think we also have got to be very careful, and we're still, I think the evidence is out there that there is still a lot of room here there's a big gap that's still not being filled. And I think we have to avoid deluding ourselves about this because, multilateral development bank capital and public sector capital from developed countries more generally remains quite limited. It's dependent on these wealthy countries' ODA commitments, and a lot of the blended finance tools they have to be charged to multilateral development bank capital, one for one. When we look at that, we are hoping that use of that MDB, those MDB resources can leverage a lot greater private capital coming in. But I think we're still having issues seeing some of that. And I think it's very useful in that connection for all of us to have some conversations with major asset owners to understand what is it that what's the issue here? Why are we not seeing a lot more of this happening. The transactions tend to be very difficult to identify. They tend to take a long time to stand up. And I think we have to be quite cautious about this. So where does that leave us? I think the long-term solution, of course, is going to be what we've been seeing in some of the emerging market countries to effect the reforms that will increase the comfort level of the major asset owners in the global savings pool. That's going to be very important to see, and I'm hoping that we will see that continuing and intensifying on the part of all of our the expertise that the MDBs can bring to this. I think there's another issue which I think we have not yet tackled. We are beginning to, and that I think will help. As we focused on climate and biodiversity, it's become more and more evident that the emerging markets are the custodians of a tremendous share of this global resource, and they are entirely justified in turning to the global north and saying, okay, you want us to protect these resources. How are we going to pay for that? Because to a very great extent, a lot of economic activity that has been necessary to support people's livelihoods has been derived from the exploitation of that resource base. And I think we are all beginning to focus a lot more on what do we have to do to reduce deforestation, what do we have to do to improve watershed management, all of these issues. And yet we're not seeing the resources flowing into those activities that emerging market countries are entitled to expect. So I think that's going to be another important aspect of opening up the markets for this. It was interesting to see Brazil brought forward at the COP a proposal to establish a multilateral sovereign wealth fund that would generate excess returns to reward tropical forest countries with cash for their success in that effort. And that's an example, I think, of trying to begin to put a value on these crucial resources and integrate them in the markets. And when I've looked at all of these, some of the new proposals coming forward, I think they're going to be very, very, it's going to be very important to integrate Islamic finance into the solution base for it. And I think it's actually, a lot of these opportunities are going to be very susceptible to doing that. But I'll stop there, and thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I think it's been great to get kind of the demand side from Dr. Mahmood, and then you kind of, where is the supply of financing going to come from? So maybe we can turn to, a practitioner in this space. We have two Michaels. I'm going to start with Michael Bennett. And kind of from your experience in structuring a lot of the bonds in multiple currencies that the World Bank has done in this space, what role do you think Sukuks can play in unlocking finance for climate positive investments? How do you see the Sukuk market in particular growing, and the green, social, and sustainability Sukuk market advancing climate finance in particular?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, I want to thank ISDB for the invitation to speak. They're always very generous allowing me to speak at these events, because the World Bank, we've issued less than $1 billion of Sukuk. So we are a minnow compared to ISDB and other issuers like Indonesia. So appreciate being given, even despite our small size of issuance, this opportunity. There was a very famous American bank robber named Willie Sutton, and it says something about the United States that we're a country that has famous bank robbers. But when he was finally arrested, he was asked why he robs banks, and he said, because that's where the money is. And exactly what Ken was saying, the high-grade fixed income market is where the money is in terms of solving many of these problems. And there is no better way to motivate large segments of that market these days than to have green and sustainable story behind your issuance. Now, that's not universally true. That's much more true if you're speaking to investors in Stockholm and Frankfurt than if you're speaking to investors in Texas and Florida. But in general, issues of green growth and sustainability are motivating investors now and are the best way for issuers to get their product in front of a broad group of investors. Now, how can the Sukuk product fully take its place in that high-grade fixed income market? I think clearly we have the types of issuers that are needed. We have a leading supranational in ISDB. We have large sovereign issuers with very ambitious green growth plans like Indonesia and Saudi Arabia. And we have private issuers as well that are doing great work in leading technologies for green growth. So the issuer side, I think we are definitely there. We have significant market infrastructure, and I think the announcement today just adds to that. The ICMA, LSE, ISDB sustainability guidelines is an important step in terms of that market infrastructure. So we have issuers, we have the market infrastructure, and I think the real remaining challenge is how to develop the investor base. Because to be quite honest, getting an existing investor of your bonds or Sukuk to buy a green version is not all that hard. If they already know you as a credit, they're already buying you, to move them from buying a non-labeled bond to a green bond is not that big of a trick. I mean, there may be some investors who are just outwardly hostile to colors, but otherwise it's not that big of a trick. The real trick here is getting investors that would not otherwise look at your product to look at it because they're motivated by the green and sustainable story. And that is definitely happening, as we heard from the governor from Indonesia. That's definitely happening, but how could it happen in greater scale? And I think a lot of it comes to investor education that all of us in this room have to really dedicate time to, because what we've seen as a Sukuk issuer, and I said a very infrequent Sukuk issuer, but as a Sukuk issuer, is that there are certain stumbling blocks in the minds of investors right now, non-traditional Sukuk buyers who look at this product, conventional investors who look at this product for the first time. One is absolutely a sense that it's a structured product, because a lot of Sukuk require special purpose vehicles and very complex charts in the pricing supplements to sell. So there's definitely a perception that it's a highly structured product. I think there's also a perception that it's a highly exotic product. When you're talking about a Sukuk product and you need to use Arabic words, and you're talking to an investor in New York or even worse in Austin, Texas, about that product, it seems exotic. And now that does not necessarily mean the investor won't buy the product, but it means they'll start adding on a premium in the price that they're going to require. Because any of those words like exotic and structured translate into premium and pricing. So you end up, if you're selling a Sukuk product, you may end up paying more than you would if you were selling a conventional bond, just to interest that type of investor. So a good deal of investor education is needed, and it's very heartening in that sense to see the great work that folks like LSE and ICMA are doing on the investor education side. And I think it's at that point, once we can demystify the product, where you'll really see Sukuk take their place with bonds and other fixed income products in the green and sustainable space.
Thank you. I think that's been a consistent theme from what the governors mentioned, the president, Dr. Zamir, just kind of how do you make this a mainstream product that people understand. So I think you mentioned that issuers are ready, so maybe I can move to you, Michael Elam. As an underwriter, you're working directly with the issuers of Sukuks and green and social and sustainability Sukuks. In the sovereign market, what do you see in terms of appetite and pipeline for this type of product, and how do you work with issuers or issuers that are doing this for the first time?
No, well, thank you very much, Faheen, and thank you to the Islamic Development Bank and Dr. Zamir for inviting me onto this panel. It's a great privilege to be here today. I think to date, we haven't seen that much issuance from sovereigns in the green Sukuk market. I think that does mean that, and we certainly see significant potential to grow that market. I mean, a lot of the sustainable Sukuk has been focused perhaps a bit more on GREs or financial institutions. Islamic Development Bank, of course, has been a great leader in this market. Indonesia has been a repeat issuer, of course. Malaysia has also issued, but I think there's a lot of potential to go beyond that. Of course, many sovereigns have issued in green format, including a number of members of the Islamic Development Bank have issued in that format, and a number of them have also published their own sustainable financing frameworks with the clear intention to issue kind of on the back of that. Many sovereigns have also issued in Sukuk format. That includes not only from Islamic countries, but also from some non-Islamic countries, such as the UK, Hong Kong, Luxembourg, for example, for their own particular reasons. I think you've also seen sometimes the same issuer issuing in green format and in Sukuk format, but not yet bringing the two together. And I think that's kind of the challenge. And I think if you're looking at this really from the point of view of a finance ministry or a debt management office, a lot of the time they're trying to manage what, to some extent, not always, but to some extent, I think is a trade-off between trying to develop deep, liquid markets for your bonds in foreign currencies, going to be focused primarily on dollars and to some extent on euros, with another objective, which is around diversifying your sources of financing and tapping into a wider pools of capital. And I think from the perspective of many debt management offices, they might look at green and Sukuks to some extent as alternatives kind of within that spectrum. So they might be looking to issue in dollars and euros for their core benchmarks, and then they might be looking to access the green market, or they might be looking to access the Sukuk market, they might be looking to access other currencies, onshore China or whatever it might be. So I think the challenge really is how do we kind of bring these together. I think I very much agree with the comments that Michael just made around the investor perspective. I think for your conventional ESG investors, historically, they haven't really seen Sukuk as a key part of their mandate. And equally for Sukuk investors, perhaps in the past, they haven't really focused on the green or the ESG kind of label. We do think that is changing and certainly has potential to change. We do see more interest, I think, from traditional ESG investors, particularly from outside of this region, for example, looking to add Sukuk more to their mandate. I mean, I can think of one example, for example, of a very large Asian investor that in the past hadn't looked at Sukuk, but once the green label was added, suddenly they become kind of interested. So I think it can be an important way by adding the green label of accessing a wider pool of investors. And equally, even traditional Sukuk investors, as awareness, understanding, political focus, policy push around the ESG agenda becomes more important, then I think we will see more traditional Sukuk issuers, also investors also looking to buy the green Sukuk products. So we do see this coming together. I think the guidance that's been published today by the Islamic Development Bank, London Stock Exchange, ICMA is incredibly important in that regard, because if we sort of stand back, many of the core principles of Islamic financing around developing a sustainable and socially responsible financial system are very much aligned with sustainable financing focus on integration of sustainability objectives into investment decision making. So I think there's great potential for this coming together. I think events like this help raise awareness and understanding, and I think in particular the document that was published today, I think will really help push this market forward.
No, super. I think you noted that trying to attract kind of a broad range of ESG investors that have different interests and specificities. So maybe, Mahmoud, to go back to you, when in your remarks you had noted that climate, there's a lot of focus on mitigation, but adaptation is a key part of it as well. And it would be great for you to, but I think that those of us who are involved in the space, it's becoming even more nuanced, right? Financing is needed for new technologies, for electric vehicles, for weather insurance, catastrophe bonds. The space is growing, getting more nuanced, and the financing needed for that. So it'd be just great for you to double click on how, in your discussions, especially with emerging markets and member states of the ISDB, what is that consciousness of financing things outside of traditional mitigation and adaptation that are getting people, more, and will that kind of spur an interest in climate finance if there's a broader spectrum of aspects, green infrastructure, energy efficiency, et cetera, to finance?
Right. Well, thank you so much. And let me as well react to a couple of very important points that the rest of the speakers just mentioned, and see exactly how can we address some of the expectations on the demand side as well. So we are here if we are dealing with issues related to low-income countries, low-middle-income countries, especially in the African continent. We would say that there are more and more demands for adaptation finance. Issues related to emissions, it was mentioned yesterday as well, nothing that we should be very much proud of as Africans and people belonging to the global south, that given that the level of industrialization was not really that big, the emissions were not really that high. So 3.5% of total emissions are the responsibility of the whole African continent.
That's right.
This is a fraction of some of the big country of emissions, either cumulatively, like Europe and the US, or some of the emerging markets like China and India today. But the adaptation needs are huge. And I shared with you the figures. First attempt to spell out the opportunities, it was in Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27, and I'm happy that that was built on more in Dubai. But again, where exactly you'll find the private finance to fund the resilience of cities, or dealing with the rising sea levels, or investing more in mangrove? There are some opportunities, but not really with the way that you can really be relying heavily on the private sector in doing that. I'm not surprised that so far it's 2% to 3% of the total coming from the private sector. Some colleagues, including in the Center for Adaptation in Holland, they say it could be a classification issue. But even if we do the reclassification, again, the private sector contribution is limited. Here, that would require, perhaps on what mentioned by the governor, lots of ideas related to design of the product, some blended finance solutions, more on the de-risking elements, public-private partnership, but with more innovation. And actually, when it comes closer to the MDBs, after improvement, the MDB's share of adaptation improved from 15% to 30%. They didn't reach 50%. The Green Climate Fund, small, but reached parity. But again, when I see the Green Sukuk as a solution, I would say, well, will it be helpful in dealing with the first problem raised about the insufficiency? If it brings more investors, make some opportunities to access that pool of funds that Ken mentioned on the pool of global saving, that would be welcome. And then what about the other issues related to the efficiency on the finance, which is basically the time it takes from the day that you shake hands with the financier until you get the money into the country and the projects. If it is, as mentioned by President Banga last year in Marrakesh, 27 months, yes, he has a plan to reduce that to a few weeks, and we're happy that he's recognizing this and pushing. But so far, it takes months and months, years and years, especially in areas related to adaptation finance. So that needs to be accelerated. Will Green Sukuk provide this kind of solution? And I'll come to a couple of ideas in that regard. And then the issue of fairness and unfairness. It's very much subjective, but we just need to remember that those who are funding adaptation are funding for matters that they were not very much responsible for. If they are low-income and middle-income countries, they were not responsible for the emissions, but now they are asked to borrow and fund for adaptation. And even if it is at zero interest rate, which is not the case, with the exchange rate volatility and the fact that there is no commercial return, there are many question marks about finance. So here comes the solutions from the Green Sukuk. If they are going to be dealing with the insufficient, inefficient, and unfairness, so let's get that. We need more than what's being reported recently on the update on Sukuk. The growth is not really that big, and the market needs really to be broadened, and perhaps of what was mentioned by the panelists, in issues related especially to de-risking, liquidity. And here I like to put that is an old piece that I did with a couple of colleagues when I was at the World Bank, and that was more than 5 years ago. But I still feel, based on what the governor mentioned and the speakers, that some of these issues would be very much needed. There are action areas. First one is the standardization. And the lack of standardization, and I'm happy that the initiative led by the Islamic Development Bank and the partners is dealing, at least partially, with this issue. Standardization to lower the cost. The other thing is basically about legal documentation. I'm not after here denying our friends from law firms the opportunities to make some good business out of that. But here, when it comes to some Sukuk, quoting the Minister of Finance from Egypt, that some green bonds, not the Green Sukuk would be even more demanding. All of these ESG colorful bonds could be requiring more in terms of standardization, verification, and paperwork. This means more time and more money. Then we need to have incentives. It seems here, I believe in leveling the playing field, but in some jurisdictions, the tax incentives, the regulatory structure is not really as benign as it should be. So here, I'm not asking for favorable treatment to Green Sukuk, although that I've seen some calls for that, but at least leveling the playing field would be a good issue to emphasize. Then I'm happy that the governor mentioned something about the credibility. And it's good that to have legal authorities, regulatory authorities are behind that, but we need really to have more clarity on what we really mean when we talk about green. And globally, we are still confused about what color is green, and the ESG confusion still there. And the final thing on these action areas is on the impact assessment. It's great to have the innovation through greening, perhaps blue, and I know that Indonesia had a couple of blue bonds as well, and the World Bank was involved, the IFC was involved, the Green Climate Fund was involved as well. But we need to see some serious impact assessment in order to encourage others not to celebrate the issuance, but to celebrate the impact. And super quick, there are some operational aspects as well. The issue of having bankable, or rather here in the case of Sukuk, investable pipeline of projects. And I'm encouraging colleagues to have a look at this piece, because that was a practical answer from my team when I was serving as a climate champion, that we believe that there is a great deal of misunderstanding of the market, that there is no bankable or investable pipeline of projects. And there is a report called From Assets to Flows demonstrating that there are opportunities when it comes to the pipeline of investable projects, from small-scale climate investment opportunities to large projects like the Indus River in Pakistan. It's a couple of $1 billion of investment, to small operations that like $5 to $10 million. So by geography, by size, by stage of development, there are opportunities. And I think going beyond the pipeline, perhaps we can address some of the issues raised by colleagues in the panel, including issues related to varieties of challenges facing the investors, including the business environment, exchange rate risk, and the other matters. Then very quickly about the transparency in the system that needs to be, we need to communicate that better. Then we have issues related to the wider ethical investor base. Those who are believing in Sukuk are not just after the commercial gain, they are after the commercial gain, but in addition to that, they are doing something over and above that, so that needs as well to be promoted. And we have seen good variety of hybrid Sukuk. Sometimes the structure is much more complicated than needed. So I think here some simplicity for clarity for investors, for regulators, and even if we are going further to encourage the general public to be contributors, not just the institutional investors, I think the structures need to be better understood than what is basically the case today. If we do that, I think we would be more or less in a better path than what we have been at so far.
Perfect. So the two things I really taken away from that is the foundational work needed, at the level of the issuers, the regulators, the whole system, and then speed to market, right? And so maybe with that, let me come back to you, Ken, and from your experience at the RAMP program, when you were at the World Bank, you worked on these foundational issues in working with your clients to help them get up to speed on tapping the capital markets, understanding the role of governance and regulators. Where, drawing from that experience, what would be a quicker way to bring us into the Sukuk and green and social and sustainability Sukuk in working in that ecosystem? And I think we had a very nice example from Indonesia in this respect, but where would you, I think, quickly give us an account of to take it to the next level, given that prior work?
Yeah, I think one of the things that came out of our experience with that reserves advisory and management program at the bank, and having listened to the Indonesia presentation, one would like to see a knowledge sharing and using that as a basis for bringing some, how would I describe it, some consistency into the process, consistency into what investors can expect to see, that is, and that also that issuers can take back and incorporate in their product design process. So that there's a lot less idiosyncrasy across these different instruments, because then on the asset side, you begin, the asset owners and the investment managers that are working for them will find it a lot easier to get their arms around what they're seeing, and it will reduce the number of variables that they have to take into account, and I think improve the process tremendously. But it does take a lot of communication and a lot of sharing of experience among people who are active in the field. That's where I've always, having attended now, that's a role that I think someone like the Islamic Development Bank could play in convening those kinds of conversations and discussions to develop that consistency.
So super. So we have convening power and regulation. And then I'm going to challenge you, Michael Yilam, on Mahmoud's point on efficiency and making the process quicker. So in your experience in the issuance of these bonds, you talked about the fact that you have the regular issuance and you've had a layering of green and then the Sukuk structure. What do you think it'll take to bring those different aspects together and make the process quicker and less of a layering, but kind of coming out in one go?
Yeah, sorry, was that addressed?
That's to you, Michael Yilam, yes.
Sorry, clearly you don't have to be called Michael to be on this panel, but it seems to help. I think that certainly the publication of these guidelines today is a very significant step forward in that regard, because, as you say, it's not straightforward to issue in Sukuk format, and it's not straightforward always to issue in green format, but clearly there's scope to bring these processes together. I think what we see is that in some ministries of finance, debt management offices, you might have the desk that's responsible for green bonds and you have another desk that's responsible for Sukuk. And I think what Indonesia has done very successfully is bring those two together. So that's clearly critical. I think we've also seen, with respect to Sukuk, a number of countries have issued legislation. I mean, that might be challenging up front, but once that legislation is in place, it then makes the issuance of a programme and repeat issuance of Sukuk much easier going forward. I think one of the challenges for sovereigns when they are issuing green bonds is that typically the lead is going to be with the Finance Ministry or the Debt Management Office, but the Finance Ministry usually doesn't have many assets. The assets typically would lie, and that's why perhaps it's a bit different from a bank or a company where it's a bit more integrated. The assets would typically lie with the relevant departments or the wider public sector. So having some kind of process to coordinate that is critical. But again, as in the Indonesia case and in a number of other places, it's very important as well to have that top-down support. It's quite hard for the Finance Ministry to do this alone. So I think the processes over time are becoming simpler. I think that there's clearly still some way to go, but as I say, I think publication of documents such as today and the role that the ICMA and others can play in this respect is critical to driving this forward.
Thank you. So it looks like Indonesia is a good example here. The governor's not here. We were using his case of bringing together the different partners within the government, and then the line ministries, I think, that you're talking about that are actually going to use the proceeds and to then take that forward. So Michael Bennett, now kind of ending with the last question with you before we open up for questions. So the Sukuk market is on track right now to reach $1 trillion cumulatively, and in the next 3 to 4 years, I think that's the timeline. And that's a decent volume in the capital markets, and perhaps a tipping point. I think when green bonds, hit that remark, that was seen to be a little bit of a tipping point. But we're still kind of at that cusp of not being mainstream, reaching this milestone. Where do you think the tipping point will be for Sukuks to become a mainstream asset class? Is it a volume target? Is it the number of issuers? Or something else that's going to make this the mainstream instrument that we'd like it to be?
Well, what I would say is, and my friends at ISDB here know this is a certain obsession with mine, of me, that what I would like to see is global banks treat this as a regular product, not a exotic EM product. Because I know even with the World Bank, when we issue Sukuk, we are taken around by the same banks that take us around for bonds, but by entirely different bankers. And they're not necessarily worse bankers, they're just as good bankers, but they're an entirely different set of bankers, and investors notice that. If we go to London and we always come with bankers who have London and New York business cards, and then we suddenly appear in front of the same investor with bankers that all have Dubai business cards, investors notice, and again, the reaction of those investors is not necessarily, I don't want to buy this, it's, okay, now I'm going to get a little more spread. Suddenly the spread goes up. So, and no, I mean, I fully support Dubai bankers, I should say. I think I love our Dubai bankers. But the global banks are not treating this as a global product. They treat it as an EM product. And there's where I would really ask Michael, and since we have you on the panel, you know, to think about having this traded and treated like a global product, not a specific EM product. And I think that will go a long way to demystifying this product and mainstreaming it.
That's a really good suggestion. I mean, we've seen this happen at JP Morgan with the green team used to be separate, you know, and now they've been kind of mainstreamed into the regular debt capital markets teams. They sit on those desks, and maybe that is a more important tipping point and milestone rather than just a dollar amount or number of issuers. So I think, you know, Mahmoud, you want to say something to that?
Well, I think this is a very important point raised now. And it's not just about the Sukuk market. It's about many of the Islamic finance products. If we are insisting on calling them in particular way, marketing them for particular segments of market, they will be very much dwarfed and they will not really be subject to the potential growth that they deserve. And a very able and pioneer leader on Islamic finance and banking, the former governor of the Central Bank of Malaysia, Governor Ziti, was very much known, and she has done a lot in this area, in the Sukuk, in the Islamic finance products. And she was very much proud that the products are there for everybody to use, not for a particular segment. And she was proud that many of the non-Muslims in her country are consuming these products because they bring good value, they are credible, they are transparent, they are liquid. From the time that you deposit with a bank, which is the most basic product, which in this case it's a kind of an investment, to the more sophisticated products. It's like exactly buying from a particular shop. If you insist just calling it halal, it's great, but if it is going to be at a good, affordable price with a high quality, this will make it still halal, but will be opening it for more markets around. And that pool of finance is there. It's basically an issue of choice. But we have a bigger problem that I referred to briefly in some particular markets with the politicization of green, with the ESG challenges that has nothing to do with Sukuk. So in this case, Sukuk may have three troubles: by them being Sukuk, by them trying to be green, and by them trying to penetrate market that already being politicized. So I think here, I wouldn't blame it just on that particular side on the issuance, but I think some sort of better effort in standards and regulations globally, and then making sure that this asset class is worth it for those who are investing in it.
No, I think it's a great point, and hopefully a lot of these kind of labels and kind of you know, these additional aspects are done to draw in new investors, but how do we bring that curve faster and faster to make them mainstream, more regular, and seen to be a financial product? I think at this time, I'm going to just open up briefly to the audience. I see a few questions. Please state your name and your affiliation, and then if there's a particular person that you'd like to address.
Right here.
Thank you, Mahin. My name is Dr. Adnan Aziz. I'm the Chief Program Officer for Global Islamic Finance Program for Climate, Nature, and Development. I guess it can cut across all the panelists, but particularly to yourselves, Mr. Mahmoud. I was very, very motivated with a lot of what you said, actually, and the rest of the panel, too. I think if we start to dissect the current Sukuk market and the issuances between sovereigns and corporate, for that matter, whatever be the size, that of course getting close to $1 trillion soon as well. For most part of it, it relies on the obligos positioning, right? So that's where the credit sits. Now, if you start looking into that, then most of the assets on which Sukuk are built are either backed by the government or the corporates, the real estate, and so on and so forth, or direct balance sheets of the issuers for themselves. So that's where Sukuk has so far thrived. And I'm not suggesting that bankers are to be blamed for it, because that's where they find the opportunity. What I see here is one of the missing pieces in this equation, and a lot of the rest of it has already been covered by the panelists, is the supply side. When it comes to green Sukuk to invest into green those issues, those opportunities, who is going to be the providers of those opportunities to the bankers? Bankers are not going to go and seek for those themselves and manufacture those. I guess there has to be something around it. What I believe, and possibly this is where I believe yourselves, and particularly Mr. Mahmood, you can advise further, I think there's a lot of work happening globally otherwise when it comes to the supply side. And perhaps the fact that the projects, they're agnostic towards whether it is Islamic capital or non-Islamic, I guess there is a need and a value in a collaborative effort here, joining hands with them, so more and more of those opportunities can be provided and access to the Islamic capital owners for that matter, and particularly when it comes to adaptation, because adaptation is a missing piece, and most of the countries in the Islamic markets, we need a lot of adaptation there. How do we bring that into the equation is going to be, and the bankability of those in particular. We see most of the Sukuk currently issued in the green space without naming. I can tell you, I have looked into the documents, you do not really find transparent mention of the use of the proceeds, something which the governor mentioned, for example, as the first pillar. So where are they going to go? Very high-level, superficial green for the sake of ticking the box? Is that what you're aiming for? That's what I wanted to leave this panel with. Thank you.
I don't know if any of you want to comment on the supply side and the actual assets and use of proceeds they go towards. Michael, I don't know if what you've seen in your experience.
I mean, I think a couple of comments. One, I think I would be very interested to see the study that Mahmood referred to, suggesting that actually the supply of bankable and investable projects is much greater than is generally perceived, because I think there is a perception kind of in the market that notwithstanding all of the great efforts to mobilize more private finance, the biggest challenge is often finding investable projects, and I think that's where the multilateral development banks have a critical role to play in helping drive that process, and also where blended finance, the type of suggestions that Ken was making as well, can be critical, I think, in this respect. So I think that's one consideration. The second, we've spoken about green, we haven't really spoken about sustainable, and obviously this is a framework that is about sustainable assets and not just green assets, so that could include social assets as well. So that you could issue either a purely social kind of bond to finance social infrastructure, or a combination kind of the two. So I think that's another way in which perhaps the supply side could be driven more.
And I think the example given by Indonesia on the reporting that comes thereafter, right, and then the impact reporting to then give investors that confidence of where those monies have been used. So I think I saw another question, please.
Please keep the question brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Rachel Miangiangone. I'm UN Women representative in Niger. So you might imagine why climate change is really important for me and for my country. I would like to congratulate you on this enriching discussion. And as you know, UN Women has alerted the world to the fact that it will take more than 300 years to reduce the gender inequality in the world. And the UN statistic, I know that Dr. Mahmood knows that, the UN statistic shows that 80% of people displaced by climate change are women, which is likely to be the main factor in mainstreaming, in maintaining gender gap worldwide. My question now, what are green Sukuk and ISDB, all partners here in the panel are doing to ensure gender mainstreaming in green sukuk and all the green fund put in place to support the climate issue. And secondly, what together we will do to ensure that women's role are recognized in climate mitigation and adaptation initiative as agent of change, not only as beneficiary. Thank you very much.
So that's super interesting. I think that's one more layer, and I think ICMA has been involved in the past with both UN Women and IFC, if I'm not mistaken, on gender bond principles, for example. So that's another layer to bring in. Any comments from the panel on maybe the social sustainable extending to gender?
If I can take part of that question, as it
from
was for
ISDB,
ISDB
perfect.
as well, just sharing our experience with you. So as part of our realigned strategy, women empowerment is a cross-cutting area for all projects that are proposed and designed by the Islamic Development Bank. So those SDGs and indicators are included at the very concept stage and then taken through the process up to approval and then post-implementation as well, and they are reported on it as well. So in terms of sukuk, where this is relevant, and you will see this in the guidelines, is that women are included as an eligible category for financing, women empowerment. So that's covered both in the ICMA principles and with ISDB as well on the implementation side. So we have had investors ask specifically for women empowerment projects as well for a social sukuk, and so we are able to do that with that pool of assets, underlying assets, to make sure that those proceeds are going towards these projects. So with clear indicators and measurable results in the reports.
Perfect. I had a fifth panelist right behind me. So given that she was talking about ISDB and how the MDBs play a role, thank you for that comment. I think I see one more question, then we're going to wrap up. So please.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed Minhaj. I come from Silicon Valley. I'm a scientist, technologist, inventor, but I also build industries. Previously, I was the president for the Muslim Business Chamber of North America and technology advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. I built Malaysia's microchip design industry, bringing a benefit of more than $32 billion. Now I'm building two industries, climate change and food security. And I'm hoping that I can bring even much bigger benefit. In Silicon Valley, I mean, I deal with venture capitalists all the time. One of the things that we look at is how to reduce the risk for a deal flow. And so that, like Michael said, I mean, it is not exotic, and it can get better funding and faster funding. I don't know if ISDB has any mechanism for that. I mean, do they have any such mechanism whereby countries who are looking at sukuks or green bonds and to see how they can remove the kinks in their projects so that there could be a better deal flow? And what does the panel think about that?
So I think maybe back to you and maybe the World Bank on any kind of risk mitigation that you'd like to address.
Yes, I think as just an overview, so we have, as part of our overall financing process, we also have a component which is in line with other MDBs, that is technical assistance to help build that capacity and awareness with the member countries and the beneficiaries who can then design them into projects. So that technical assistance convenes experts from the fields and assists the member countries to design those projects better and help make them bankable for the market.
Anyone else here?
Yeah, exactly the same. I mean, we have an advisory aspect to our work at the World Bank, which is split, in our case, private sector firms with IFC and sovereigns with the World Bank, helping them prepare what they need to issue a green or social or sustainable bond.
Mahmoud?
Right. Just reaction to the two questions earlier, if I may, because there is what I can consider as a game changer by the adoption of a new system of national accounting that's going to be proposed this year as part of the Summit of the Future of the UN. As you know, we all work based on the social national accounting system, and valuing what counts could really help in some of the aspects that were raised, either in issues related to nature and adaptation in the first question, or matters related to women and their contribution to society. Here, the issue would come in different ways that would be included in the natural capital accounting and the issues related to biodiversity. So here that will start to have a kind of a value, and when you start to have a value, you can always have a price attached to it. The problem with many of the aspects that we're dealing with, especially when it comes to nature, matters related to adaptation, that the value is not recognized, and here the price cannot really be verified, and then you cannot really issue anything conventional or sukuk or otherwise. The other thing, that when it comes to the impact of women and girls, and yes, the evidence had cited that women and girls are the most impacted when it comes to natural and climate disasters. Now, this is going beyond what we spoke about now. It's beyond mitigation. This is the first line of defense that we failed miserably at, and that's why we're talking about adaptation finance. And when we started to be a victim, this is not an adaptation, this is loss and damage, which is now the area that the World Bank is hosting, but with a different, separate structure of governance, that here we'll start to get the loss and damage. And here the loss and damage will not really be compensating everybody. Actually, it will be more to do with the physical damage. And perhaps with good reference by John Tirole, that everything, again, has a value, has a price, with the exception of human being. They have a dignity, and the dignity cannot be priced. So here, if it is lost, it is lost. You cannot compensate for the loss of dignity. You can just make some sort of gesture or a confirmation that the society and the global system or the country or the government let you down, failed you, and here we are giving you some compensation that's not really compensating you for your loss, God forbid, but basically it's a kind of an admission of failure of system to reach that point. So the whole ecosystem needs to be dealt with that way. I would say then, let's work fast in making climate finance flowing where it should, do better in adaptation, otherwise we'll be in these areas in losses and damages, either for nature, for biodiversity, or for women and girls and the rest of the people.
No, thank you all so much. I think we're coming up to time, and I really would like to thank the panelists for speaking. Really, we've talked about the supply of these projects. We've talked about the investors' demand, how to kind of deepen and broaden that. But I think more importantly, how to mainstream sukuks in the capital markets, and then to make everything go faster, which is what we need to achieve our climate ambitions. Thank you all to the audience, to the panelists. Thank you for hosting us today, and good luck with the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Faheen. We are very thankful to the panelists for helping us navigate through this topic and sharing their experiences. Thank you everyone for participating with us here today. We hope to see you again at 2:30 p.m. later today for the Philanthropy Forum. Let's keep working to simplify this and accelerate it further. If I can ask for the panelists to have a group photo on the stage, please. And we'll also request the patrons for this event, the Treasurer of the Islamic Development Bank, Muhammad Sharaf, and the Head of Funding, Mr. Zaki Bantan, to also join us on stage. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome to the heart of innovation, where the sand dunes of time meet the waves of progress. Welcome to Riyadh, the pulsating capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In the cradle of civilization, where dreams soar higher than the desert dunes, a beacon of hope rises. For 5 decades, the ISDB has been a catalyst for change, empowering nations and transforming lives. As we celebrate half a century of resilience, determination, and progress, join us for a monumental event under the patronage of the custodian of the 2 holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. Ministers, policymakers, industry leaders, and changemakers from 57 member countries and many partner organizations will converge to better shape the future of sustainable development. From 27th to 30th of April 2024, Riyadh will be the epicenter of global dialogue and collaboration. Join us as we continue this collective journey of collaboration, inspiration, and transformation. 2024 ISDB Group Annual Meetings and Golden Jubilee, celebrating 50 years of impact, innovation, and partnership. Cherishing our past, charting our future. Welcome to the heart of innovation, where the sand dunes of time meet the waves of progress. Welcome to Riyadh, the pulsating capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In the cradle of civilization, where dreams soar higher than the desert dunes, a beacon of hope rises. For 5 decades, the ISDB has been a catalyst for change, empowering nations and transforming lives. As we celebrate half a century of resilience, determination, and progress, join us for a monumental event under the patronage of the custodian of the 2 holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, the epicenter of global dialogue and collaboration. Join us as we continue this collective journey of collaboration, inspiration, and transformation. 2024 ISDB Group Annual Meetings and Golden Jubilee, celebrating 50 years of impact, innovation, and partnership. Cherishing our past, charting our future. Welcome to the heart of innovation, where the sand dunes of time meet the waves of progress. Welcome to Riyadh, the pulsating capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In the cradle of civilization, where dreams soar higher than the desert dunes, a beacon of hope rises. For 5 decades, the ISDB has been a catalyst for change, empowering nations and transforming lives. As we celebrate half a century of resilience, determination, and progress, join us for a monumental event